one more minute and good morning, everyone. This is Simon Barnes from Genetec. Thank you for joining us this morning for our presentation on improving airport safety in an ever-changing world. We will start our broadcast now. If you have any questions, please use the dialog box on the screen. Apologies for that, just muted myself. Okay, so thank you for joining this morning. As well as myself, I will be joined later on by my colleague David Lenot, who is the head of our global airport practice at Genetec, to give us some feedback from outside of our own region here in the EMEA of experiences from our other airport customers and what we're hearing from the industry. This webinar is being recorded, so for reference for those who aren't able to join us today or wish to review the information later on, a link will be provided for that, as well as the slide deck as well for later use. Now we have the right slides. Okay, so this morning's agenda. We'll be looking at what is the new norm, the new normal that's going to be seen from airports in the future. We do appreciate the new norm isn't fully defined as what's going to be normal and things will continue changing, but who's actually defining what the new norm is going to be? We're looking at what advice and protocols are available from the industry and governments for airports moving forward, and how we can look at technology for monitoring and displaying alarm events and information to help the airports get back to normal. Then we'll be looking at managing the risks, the potential, and how we're looking at compliance in the system. So just doing a quick sound check, because I had a note pop up that some people are having difficulty hearing us. So if we could just get a double check on that, that would be great. Just looking at my colleagues who are online who will be addressing your questions actually while we're presenting. So, okay. So looks like we should be okay. If you as an individual have an issue with sound quality at the moment, can't hear us, then we suggest possibly sort of re-logging on to the webinar as the reports coming back from others that sound is coming through okay. So we will progress. We're looking at, as mentioned, through this agenda, we'll be looking at what will be the new normal for airports. What might it look like? What areas are going to be impacted with these changes that we're all facing in airport travel going forward? Airport management and resource planning is naturally going to be affected. Staff management, passenger management and flow. Facilities, we're going to see a huge difference in the hygiene standards and the cleanliness. So it's not the saying it wasn't clean before, but we need to keep germs at bay, and therefore there needs to be a change in the protocols. Protective equipment, that's a real change for airports as to what we're used to using at the moment, what we're used to seeing, going into higher grade equipment now. Airport operations safety, that whole thing, even down to the apron, managing social distancing in cleaning of an aircraft, in servicing of an aircraft, social distancing in security and screening, and information technology. So any area that's going to be affected by the changes that are coming forward. If we start, there we go, move our slide forward. If we look at that area, just even the problems that we face on social distancing in the airport, from when we start our travel through to the airport, in the parking and getting on a transit to come to the terminal, through the check-in area as the number of people start to build up, screening as we go through security screening and what in future will also be potentially health screening as well. Once we're through to the airside, how we interact in the retail and the food court locations, all the way through to boarding, getting on that flight. So that's that whole funnel of working down through the airport system. And then that's just on people who are departing. Then we're coming back when you're arriving, managing your arrivings for screening in certain locations. Again, that could be security and also health screening going forward, immigration locations, baggage claim, all the way through to that transit and parking again. So that whole process that we now have to look at how we can assist with as well. Some airports are already starting with processes in change. Here, this is from public websites for the Paris airports, where from early on, a couple of weeks back, the Paris airports made it compulsory to start wearing masks. Air France started compulsory pre-boarding temperature checking at their locations as well. In the UK, Manchester Airport also started asking passengers to wear face masks and gloves, but it wasn't compulsory at the airport. They were also looking at starting screening trials with thermal camera solutions as well. Heathrow Airport, the same thing, just last week started their thermal screening tests as well. This isn't to actually stop, they're very public about this, but this isn't to actually say, right, you have raised the temperature, you will not get on a plane. They're starting to evaluate the technology of how it potentially could be used. And airlines are going through changes with this as well. It's not just about the passengers, it's also about how the cargo crews and the airport staff themselves have to come to work and are screened and checked to ensure that they're still healthy to work. There are a number of guides and protocols that have been produced, particularly over the last month, that have started to come out. And we're seeing these from ESA, from other locations as well. So ACI, Airports Community International, has been a great source for this information and guidance back through to the industry. So we at Genetec are not the ones to come and tell you how things will be, but we're actually working with these organizations as well. We're members of these groups. There's information coming from IATI, British Aviation Group in the UK as well. So there is lots of information to help guide airports through processes and advise on protocols through the solutions for COVID-19. What we're going to look at this morning is, in these guidelines and protocols, how the changes that they're suggesting should go forward and how we could help with some of those solutions. So I'm going to concentrate this morning on the ESA document, which is probably the most comprehensive one that I've personally seen coming out of the organizations at the moment. Within this document, there's a few areas we're going to focus on. These cover cleaning, thermal screenings at airports, how to manage disembarking customers and passengers through the process. Thermal screening also for arrivals, the question of arrivals versus departures, management of crew members, and exit and entry for thermal screening areas and physical distancing. So in the first area we're going to look through is how can we look and help to detect the detect actions and report on social distancing standards and achievements. So social distancing reports that are coming out, as we are aware, keeping 6 feet or 2 meters away from people as we're going. Airports are very difficult locations to do that because of that channeling effect. When we get onto a plane, that's something entirely different. There are different guidelines that are set out in this document for airlines to follow and suggestions as well. We're going to look at this though from the airport application. So social distancing is a major issue to help to reduce the spread of COVID-19. The next part we're going to look at this morning is the increase in cleaning and disinfection that's required to help keep surfaces clean, keep contacts down. We're all very much used to the message about washing our hands regularly, doing it thoroughly, and the same applies to surfaces. And there are lots of surfaces that people touch in airports. That whole escalator process, the lift buttons, how all these areas can be managed and disinfected and cleaned more often, and also based on the number of passengers that are going through. The last area we're going to pick up on from these protocols this morning is triggers for thermal detection. There's been a huge amount of press going on about thermal cameras in use today. These thermal cameras we see from multiple different manufacturers. Just to clarify, Genetec do not make any thermal cameras. We look at the software side of how we look at the triggers and how we're going to handle the information that comes from these devices. So the recommendations that are coming out of ESA are regarding scanning people in the build-up and the arrivals, and also in the departures. One thing I will make very clear, the first line of this policy itself, if a national policy recommends implementing thermal screening, ESA is not there to override any local government or any... Thank you, Siri. It is not there to override any local government regulations. These are recommendations, but government local policies do take precedence over this report and this suggestion at the moment. So we're going to be looking at thermal camera solutions as well. The hard thing is, how do you get to comply with all of these changes? Implementing changes in any company usually takes time. It takes lots of people to be involved with the decision making, defining the protocol, and then teaching people about the new rules. How do you go from this is the process today, and tomorrow it's going to be a new way of world, a new world and process to work through. As protocols also develop and government guidelines change, as we're seeing with COVID-19, the rules adapt. The recommendations change based on information from scientists, medical advisors, etc., and the industry. So keeping your staff trained and informed about protocol changes is also a challenge for any company, particularly for airports where we need to get business back flowing again. Not just the staff, but it's also how we're going to work with those technologies. Are the technologies in place at airports to manage multiple different changes to protocols, to bring information together from disparate systems that would not normally need to work together to the extent that we see today? So we're going to run through a few examples about how Genetec's mission control collaborative system can help with this process, looking at how particularly the standards that are changing, the protocols that are coming forward, how we can use mission control to bring order to these changes. And that order would be across things like social distancing, the hygiene, using technologies together, unifying them to provide you overall greater safety and reduce physical contact with reduced resources that people are experiencing at airports today. So the first area we're going to look at is social distancing. This is something that in Genetec, it's new to a degree. We've in our businesses to date, we've looked at how we've been able to use CCTV and other sources to gain information for the retail world, for instance, how many people are in a shop, how many people are buying in a location, reading crowd numbers, so you can look at managing resources to put the right number of resources of members of staff to passengers in an area. Now we're taking that information to a new area. We're looking at the counting options that exist. And there are various manufacturers of software that are out there today that make software that has the ability to count people. Well, now they're actually modifying their software to give not just a count, but also an estimation of the distance between locations. So between this person and this person, are they adhering to a social distancing requirement? We're going to look at different technologies also that exist. CCTV cameras that are existing cameras in place on sites are great for some of these applications, but new technologies such as LiDAR can also give a greater accuracy to that information as well. Passenger flow analytics now can combine additional rules within that. In this example here, we see a couple of screens from companies that we work with BriefCam and CrowdVision, and their data is very much around the here and now. This is actually what we're seeing with the number of people in an area. They're adding in features as well as we speak about distancing, but in Genetec, we don't just work with one company. We look to unify these packages together. So what we're showing you on the screen now is how we're making sense of these social distancing applications with mission control and our passenger flow analytics. In the social distancing application module, we could take information that could be from an access occupancy analytic, from a Zovis people counter, quantity LiDAR information, CrowdVision solutions, combine them together. So you may have a mixture of these and also combine them with existing CCTV using video analytics or any other source of data that you have at the airport that comes out of your airport operational systems. We can then put those into groups or areas. Just where we started, for instance, with when we looked at the parking and the transit, we looked at the check-in and the screening. All of these are areas, even down to the gates. We can define which devices provide us inputs on the number of people traveling in an area, traveling out of an area. We can look at the social distancing elements in that location as well. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that you can define those social distancing rules. So we can define colors, we can define distances, and set the legend, and these can adapt with change as well. That information is all gathered together. We can then say that the information coming in from this source minus the information from this source gives us the total number of people. We can then combine that into user displays. So in Genetec Security Center, in the last few editions, we've been including dashboards. And what we're looking at here is a dashboard that's taking information from multiple different systems and sources, displaying it in a user dashboard that allows us to count the total number of people in and out of an area. And also now you're seeing the addition of the occupancy. We're also seeing in the bottom corner now the social distancing rules. These social distancing rules now tell us how many of those people in that area are actually have been complying over time with the rules that are in place on the software. What percentage? What percentage are more than 2 meters away? What percentage are less? This allows us not just in Genetec to see the here and now, but also allows us to use this information to trigger alerts and actions. So based on the information that's coming back, we could say that, okay, when we see more people who are staying closer together in an area, in a check-in area or a particular gate than there should be, it can automatically trigger a public address message to remind people about social distancing. If that does not work, you can also have the system automatically send messages out via mobile applications. So Genetec also run a mobile solution, and that could actually go straight out to the person, give them the information to say, in this area, distancing is actually breached the current requirements. They can actually attend that area. At the same time, in Genetec, you'll see that we have live CCTV pictures. In addition to not just having data, we can show you the live situation. So even an operator can decide, sitting in a control room, I've got an alert, I can use mission control to actually bring up the live image associated with that area and make a judgment of, is it really what the sensors are telling me? So you have eyes and you have data coming from the area as well. Very important to ensure the fact that we can then be managing our resources at the airport just to the areas that they are needed in. And at the same time, this is building up good practices and helping to build up passenger confidence if we can prove this is how the airport is adjusting over time with social distancing compliance. So the next stage is ensuring cleaning compliance. Again, it's a subject of the ESA report. We need to be cleaning screens, cleaning desks, cleaning check-in desks, cleaning locations, public conveniences more often. And how are we going to prove the fact that is happening? And how are we going to also adjust that based on the flow of passengers through? So with not so many passengers going through, maybe the cleaning that would have been done every 30 minutes is now going to be stretched over 45 minutes or once an hour, or the passenger numbers increase at a particular time of day. The live information this is going to give us allows us to take that action immediately. It can automatically trigger an alarm event, a trigger alert in mission control to start a process to inform an operator to say, right, passenger flow has reached this level, we now need to increase our cleaning protocols to the next stage. Now, this doesn't mean the fact that your security operator is the one who's getting the messages saying, hey, we need to increase cleaning. Within mission control, you can allocate different processes and different alerts to different operators. So you can even provide operators that are the facilities, the maintenance team, the operations team, and they will receive the relevant alerts to them. So they will get the notification. But it's the same security camera that's monitoring the area for the passenger flow, for counting the people, at the same time providing you its original cause as a security solution. So use more of what you have. So again, we can take any of this data and we can put that back together for looking into monitoring, putting on a dashboard, giving us the status updates of the system as well. So again, building good practices, providing passenger confidence that you're cleaning it. We may have all used to been seeing the fact little notices on the back of restroom doors saying this facility was cleaned by Simon at 10:35. I think our days of physical contacts like that are going to be rather limited, but a dashboard can now do that for us as well. So the next stage we'll look at is, again, how mission control puts you in control of these changes. Now, mission control itself does not require Genetec or our partners to come in to make lots of changes whenever a protocol is changing us in a site. We put you in the driving seat for this. Mission control standard applications are dynamic. They change as processes do as well. I'm just going to expand this screen to show you an example of one that we created here. In this application, we're looking at a thermal camera that's giving us a trigger. Now, thermal cameras should only ever be regarded in our view as triage. A thermal camera in an application at an airport, for instance, at a check-in desk or at a security queue location, can give you an overview. The overview itself will alert you that somebody may have an elevated body temperature. That elevated body temperature, excuse the background noise, that will disappear shortly. That elevated body temperature will give an operator the ability to get a message. When that message comes through, here we define the process, which is asking the operator to look on the cameras, look on the information being provided, confirm if the trigger event looks real. If the trigger looks real, then the next step in the process is it will send the information, the snapshot of that person, that location, to a local team who will respond. Our experience in talking to various customers around the world has been where we've seen thermal cameras in use, and you often see screens with images of people, as we're seeing here at the moment. If they're in the public view, this can cause panic. Somebody looks hot, and somebody doesn't know really what they're looking at, and another passenger flowing through, they could panic. If a camera is being used to flash and beep when it detects somebody with an elevated body temperature, again, that can cause panic around the other people of the standing around that person themselves. And that's what we want to not have. We want to cut back on any panic potential situations. So this allows that controlled, managed operator to get the alert, to review the situation, to direct via a mobile application to the person that's standing at the front of that queue and say to that person, okay, could you step over here, please? And the next person goes to the right. So it's not in the public face, it is being managed and controlled. In this application, the questions that we've just set up are showing send the information to the local team, then ask the question to, I should say, is that traveler traveling alone? Coming through an airport, it could be somebody that's traveling in a group, it could be a family. At that point, you may not want to split, and not necessarily suggest splitting one member of a family away because they've got an elevated body temperature. You want to keep that group together. Every answer that's given through this process step in mission control gives us more data. Are they traveling alone? Are they with children? What's the follow-up? When they went for the secondary test with a proper medical thermometer, contactless thermometer, did it prove positive or negative? All this gives us information that we can then put back into a display to an operator and for dashboards. How this would look from a configuration page to an operator would be something like this. So what the operator sees on the screens is the question that's presented to them. They're presented with the question. Okay, do you want to send the information to the local operator? Has the yes, no. You can define all of the answers yourself using the configuration tool. And this is dynamic. The questions themselves can even change based on a configuration that you choose. It could be time of day, it could be number of passengers in a queue, it could be the current state. So if your government defines a level of COVID-19 risk, that itself that you can put into the system will change the questions that are followed and the process. So an operator's system becomes dynamic. By presenting the operator with all the information, the questions to ask, you overcome the issue of training. And when processes change, the information is there presented for them. All of that information also then is available with the answers to those questions to put back into a dashboard. So now you'll see a new dashboard. Here we're looking at the number of people that are screened, the number of people that have been cleared, the number have been sent for secondary screening, and in this application, the number of people that are sent back home. So giving us all statistics and data. Other areas we can include in the questioning and the reporting are things like the thermal detectors all need calibration. We can discuss this later, but some have different sensors that require something called a black box, which gives a constant readout. Others look at calibration on a daily or weekly. How often was that device last calibrated? Are we seeing a trend in more false positives or false negatives based on when it was calibrated? So collecting all this information, presenting it, helps you provide more information to make passenger confidence higher. Thermal cameras, again, those SOPs are very important. The questions that you ask an operator, the process and the information you want to get out of the system is all within your control. What our experience has been also is about treating those people, particularly coming through an airport, who may trigger a thermal camera with sensitivity, with respect and dignity. The last thing that any of us want to do is actually start pulling people to one side and treating them in an unfair fashion just because they've got an elevated body temperature. If you were the one who was standing behind somebody else and an alarm and whistles went off when the person went, I think if it was me, I'd probably start to get a bit warm and flustered as well, so which probably would raise my temperature and the next time I step in front of a camera. So treat people, manage the situation, and protect your staff and the fellow passengers. There is a really good document which I'm just going to share with you now as well, which is also, again, come out of great resources from the ACI. And for all airport members, if you're members of ACI, please, you can go online and have access to these yourself if you're ACI membership. But this document, Resilience in Crisis, really, for me, addresses the key learnings that we should all be looking to how we operate in airports and how we configure and use technology in this way as well. Through remembering the fact that there is light at the end of the tunnel with this, we are seeing, please say, a downturn, and we're seeing how we're managing systems better. Taking personal responsibility and leadership in how these systems are configured, supporting others in the way that we address situations. Prioritizing communication. Dashboards are great ways of actually sharing the positives. As we're seeing from those websites earlier, airports and airlines are coming out saying, we're taking these steps, we're following these processes, we're doing this to protect you, to protect us, and to protect the general public. Don't panic. It's a great piece of advice, and it's treating people with respect, treating people with dignity, and using emotional intelligence. And pay attention to people's own well-beings as well. We want to look after ourselves. By looking after ourselves, we're looking after others. Okay. So this is a great document. I please refer you to ACI for this as well. So at this stage, what I'd like to do is bring in one of my colleagues I mentioned earlier, David Lenot, and to ask David, outside of EMEA, what else we're seeing in other parts of the world from the global airport business. David, good morning to you. I can't hear you, David. Are you on mute?
Yes, very tricky technology. Good morning, Simon. Good morning, everyone. Well, thanks, Simon, for this. Obviously, a lot is happening outside of Europe. You would have figured it's not a domestic or regional issue. We see really initiative from every corner of the globe. And we see also that those initiatives happen as the crisis develops and moves from continent to continent. We have a number of clients who have been deploying some measures using our platform in Europe, and I think it's safe to say in the UK as well for you, Simon, but in many other territories. Globally, we see right now a lot of tension in Latin America, and that's probably actually the region where airports are most aggressively looking at deploying technology and solution to support operations. I have to mention the Puerto Rico airports, San Juan, who has went actually public with some of the installations. Or you can easily find the information online. So San Juan Airport in Puerto Rico, even some very interesting video they've posted, and they have actually embraced the thermal imaging as a way to triage a passenger. And I want to mention there the interesting thing with thermal imaging is if it is well implemented for what it can, so not fever detection but high body temperature, and really well used as a triage. So it's not a finger pointing tool, but it's really a way to sort of help picking people who may have an issue and then actually attend them, right? So the goal of this is to to see if they have an issue or not, and then figure out how to care for them. That it proves very efficient, and the feedback we've heard from San Juan was actually very positive, and we all sort of also anxious about the passenger well-being, which you mentioned, Simon, and how it is being perceived by passenger to be monitored and to be investigated, and with the right way of operating it, which is really picking people gently and then offering them further medical checkup. The feedback was extremely positive on how people have been reacting, and it's one of the places where we really see about being cautious on how they manage people.
I think possibly the slide I may have on the screen now, David, is this the one for San Juan?
Yeah, I think that's a screenshot from the San Juan airport. So actually it brings me to one next comment. There is also, it's interesting to see how this is being implemented, or where it is being implemented in airports, depending on the local regulations. So in Puerto Rico, the government is imposing a check on people coming in the country or in the territory, in the state. So the cameras are located really just after people exit the aircraft. There are other airports, again, in Latin America, where this is being deployed a bit more massively, and where screening happens at the entrance of the airport. So before you can get into the terminal building, you would have gone through a number of checks, including thermal imaging, but also the fact that you wear a mask, and the fact that you have actually used gel for your hands, etc., etc. And they're also using them before screening and security, or before baggage claim for people inbound. So this is all being really widely deployed, and the point we want to make here is all those measures should have goals, really. And then the goal is first of all to make sure for airports that the business can resume. So it's not just back to normal, but back to some level of business. And to be able to do that, a number of steps have to be taken, and the well-being of the passenger and the confidence of passenger that they can fly safely, the well-being of the staff, and also that they feel confident that they can go to work and are well taken care of. But also some government regulations. Of course, we all try to implement things which have shown evidence of working or are scientifically based, and this is what everyone does. So private entities such as airports and also governments, but yes, airport must apply government regulations. So that's the first source of inspiration to do things. And then there are all the regulations or the concept defined themselves, each individual airport. But then, yes, that's what you described, Simon, is the challenge of implementing those regulations in no time. We were having a panel with airports lately, and an American airport was commenting that they don't even have time to write the regulations and get the regulations or the ideas approved by the boards and get them deployed. So it's really, really difficult. It means what? It means people implement things as they find them appropriate, but then next day you may have a change in the regulation. So your challenge is, one, to be able to implement regulation that fast, or protocols that fast. And second is to be able to prove that you had them implemented. And if there is a change, then you have to be able to prove that you made the change accordingly. And in the same way, for social distancing, for example, what you showed earlier is we can build those graphs showing social distancing, but those graphs should just be the reason for you, or should be the tool for you to see if your measure did work. So you implemented measure, did that improve social distancing? And if the numbers are bad, then how quickly can you go and change what you have done to create better figures, so to say, and make sure social distancing works better. So Yeah, so internationally, definitely, I would say thermal imaging has been a bit of the hype, and we also hear all the controversy about the actual value of the thermal imaging reading. And you made that point, Simon, that it's a triage tool. It's not a health a condition, a measurement tool that does not work. There's specific components for that. And so thermal imaging has been one, and I would say the other one is really the cleaning. The cleaning part, so make sure cleaning happens on a regular basis or on demand. And again, that those cleanings are happening as expected, and that all of this is documented. And I would say the last portion of what we hear and see internationally is how to protect staff. So we talk a lot about passenger, but how do we reduce exposure of the staff? And one of the good example is the fact that the ground staff is being sent to attend issues. So whichever passenger has an issue, or it could be a maintenance issue, or whatever protocol has to be implemented on site, and the control center receives a number of calls and alerts, and then sends people, dispatches staff. What we've heard an example of a site where as much as 70% of the occurrences where staff was sent, actually nothing was actually happening. So calls were made and things were escalated, but there was nothing to attend. So in 70% of the cases, staff was sent in the wild and exposed for no reason. So again, there we see mission control is the right tool, that when there is a call coming in and an issue is being raised, first it has to be checked if it's a genuine issue. And that effort of validating and cross-checking that it's an actual case where you must send someone, yeah, that's the right cooperation tool and platform for the different stakeholders to do that validation. So yeah, that was the I would think the few examples I wanted to bring.
I think it also reminds me of some of the other innovations for resilience we've seen our own customers coming up with in Genetec as well. Something that comes to mind for me was a hospital, a customer of ours in North America, who had visited our premises for training before, had seen the fact that we have a touch screen ability in our Genetec restaurant to select which meal you actually have taken. It's just done on a loyalty process, and the fact that I had this meal, I had this, and they actually contacted Genetec to ask, could we adapt that and use that software for them to take out and issue their own personal protective equipment. So now they can keep track of who's taking something, how many they've taken, in a nice, easy graphical application. There is a CCTV camera there to protect it, so if somebody's taking more than they should, then they can go back and check. But it's customers coming up with this type of idea. And also on your last point about, do people need to go out? We had a hospital that used the IP intercoms to actually put these into patient locations to allow staff to interact with patients, obviously at the right stage of their medication, without having to keep going into a room to use fresh PPE each time. So they could ask that person if they're doing okay, yes, what can we do for you, without exposing themselves more and using up more equipment. So innovation is coming from a customer side, very much so.
Absolutely.
So we've had the question box going as well. I know that, David, you've been monitoring that and addressing, and if anyone has any questions, I know we're coming up on our time for this morning's presentation, then please do carry on putting your questions into the question box here. David, anything that you've seen that we can jump on while we're talking now?
Yeah, I do have a few questions. A number of questions actually around the workflows and SOPs that you have mentioned a few times. One of the questions is on, well, beside the product itself, if we can provide assistance to create those workflows and SOPs.
Very much so, yes. Genetec can provide assistance in multiple different ways. That could be through the use of our own professional services. So we have our own team of engineers who are available to work with our system integrated partners and our end users to help apply these the solutions and teach. We have also, with Genetec, we've been providing training to our end users and our integrators directly for many years. And as you can imagine, this has changed in the last few months. So in fact, now all Genetec training modules are also available online. So anyone who has a training requirement can also now take these courses online, which aren't just watching a YouTube, they're actually with a live Genetec trainer connected over a webcam, over a solution like this, teaching a class as they would have before. So yeah, we can assist with that in multiple different ways.
Thank you, Simon. A related question. Interesting one, actually. The question is, does mission control have a standard, or is there a standard behind mission control? And if so, which organization would be defining that standard?
Does mission control have a standard? No technical standard that I can think of, unless you could think of one, David, but
no, I don't think it has a standard as in maybe yeah, an industry standard or a technical standard. And I think actually that's the idea of mission control together is that's a tool within which you can define any workflow or any SOP. It gives you the full flexibility to implement standards which are given by whichever organization. So if you'd say right now the ACI recommendation would be the standards of doing things, then you could take that standard and you could digitize it with mission control and then make sure you apply it properly. So it would work effectively for any standard in any industry. And then there was an attached question, which was if we would have a webinar for industrial zones, yeah, which would make me say is effectively mission control would work exactly similarly for industrial zones. And yeah, we can, I'll pick this offline with you, Barish, but we can definitely talk about industrial zones with mission control.
Yeah. And I'd just probably add to that as well. Any of these workflows that you create with mission control, as the examples you saw on my screens earlier, they can all be exported and you can import them as well. And in Genetec, we also provide a template library of predefined SOP, standard operating procedures and protocols that are available to our customers. And you can then start as a template, go in and modify and change around to suit your particular requirements. Save it again, duplicate it again, modify it for a different protocol arrangement. So our standard is to be open, to be secure, but to be open.
Again, sort of a tricky question, but well, if one does not have mission control yet and wants to implement the first protocol, maybe just as a trial or probably completely, how much time would that cost to deploy a mission control instance and configure it and use it? What are we looking at?
Mission control is a standard application within Genetec. We have customers who may have an existing version of Genetec. If they wish to add mission control to that, we can look at a proof of value application or a proof of concept. We can also then look at a configuration of licenses. So it is based on a license for the number of concurrent operator screens that are running. In the current circumstances, what we've actually seen as the quickest way to deploy, and we're doing remote deployment available now with this, the software is available to download, to install on a server will provide the architecture that's required, and it could even run on a separate server with what's known as a federation link into the existing Genetec system. So it will take the existing data, configure the application that's there, and now bring your information together.
So do you reckon that if somebody has a security center instance already running, I mean, most probably within half a day you have deployed your mission control, and the rest of the day you'd be able to configure things and have it rolling?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Loading existing to an existing client is quite easy. You'll spend more time actually once you've got those templates looking about how things adapt and change specifically to your own site. But again, we can guide people through that, through the templates, through the training process as well. And our experience, again, it's customers also come back and teach us new tricks. Airports particularly, they know how their airports operate far better than we ever would for each individual site, but we can help with that guidance.
All right. Well, I think other questions would be a bit more specific, so I guess I'd respond to them one-on-one. So I think that's it from me. Simon, thank you.
Thank you, David. So just to finish up then, so, just to leave you with the key takeaways for today's presentation. We are looking to make greater sense of information and technology that's out there to provide you as the customer more information to make informed decisions, increase security, increase protection, and make better use of resources. So all of those improvements are there to also help guide those operators. Discover more insights, understand how you're seeing information develop, how airports are getting back into business, how you can adapt resources based on the flow that's increasing. And when you have something that's working really good, you've done that configuration, you're getting that passenger flow, you're building that confidence up to passengers, that can only lead to more things, which are more passengers being able to fly safely and securely. So at that point, I'll say thank you again for joining us this morning. And if you have any questions, you'll get we'll follow up additionally after this presentation, and you'll receive an email from us with material.
Yes, Simon, I will also be. Sorry, Simon. I'll also be. I'll stay online. I got still questions coming in right now. So I mean, James, I'll attend your question in a second. I'll still be online for a few minutes. So just keep on posting, and you also can join us obviously after that. But while we close, question keep coming in. Just stay there, respond to them, and while I let you, Simon, close this. And thank you very much all for attending. Thank you, and speak soon. Bye bye.
Thank you, everybody.